Welcome to podcast number 1 of our AI-generated news summary. Let's dive into the summaries of our top stories. Our next story is titled, Watch. Bill Clinton unintentionally creates Trump's next campaign ad. Former President Bill Clinton inadvertently spilled the beans about the disastrous open southern border policies pushed by the Biden-Harris administration. Clinton admitted that Laken Riley would still be alive if there were actual vetting procedures on the southern border. Clinton also states we need illegals because our country's birth rate is low. The bill was introduced 2 years after Laken's illegal alien murderer was freed into the country by Harris. It's only a matter of time before the Trump-Vance team makes a new ad featuring Bill. The former president also admitted that the country needs illegal aliens because of the low birth rate in the U.S. He also said that we need them because we have a shortage of people to fill the gaps in our population that are left by immigrants who have already arrived in the United States. The Bill Clinton-led administration introduced the bill 2 years before Laken's illegal alien murderers were released into the United States. It was introduced by Harris and it was signed into law by Biden. Our next story is titled, Pro-Palestine protesters swarm outside the New York Stock Exchange. Performative, pro-Palestinian protesters swarmed the front of the New York Stock Exchange this morning. The activists appear to be part of the far-left Jewish Voice for Peace group. JVP dressed the Fearless Girl statue in front of NYSE with one of their shirts that read, Stop Arming Israel. On Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish year, the Israeli military carried this Indigenous Peoples Day. We pay homage to the movements that have fought against genocides Wall Street has always profited from. We refuse to let our traditions, histories, and identities be used to massacre Palestinians. Technically, nothing was shut down. The real NYSE moved to New Jersey many years ago. The group is known for direct action, some of which have been conducted on school campuses. It is a Jewish far-left, anti-Zionist group that is known to be active on college campuses. Our next story is titled, More than 400 North American 7-Eleven stores to close. 7-Eleven plans to shut down 444 underperforming stores. The closures represent more than 3% of the company's U.S. and Canadian stores. This is expected to generate approximately $30 million in operating income benefit for the retail chain. Tobacco use has fallen by 26% compared to 2019. The company stated, cigarettes made up 21.5% of total convenience store sales in 2023. 7&I Holdings received a buyout offer from Canada-based convenience store operator Alimentation Couche-Tard, ACT. In September, the firm announced that it rejected the offer. Japanese firm plans to establish an intermediate holding company that will watch over its supermarket food business, specialty stores, and other businesses. The retail chain reduced its estimate for total store sales in the second half of 2024. The planned closure of 444 stores is part of several steps being taken to ensure the long-term success of 7-Eleven outlets. Convenience stores have long dominated tobacco sales, accounting for about 70% of purchases. Our next story is titled, Liberals are losing their minds over Elon Musk. Elon Musk became persona non grata when he bought Twitter and announced that he was dismantling the company's massive censorship apparatus. He then outraged many on the left by releasing the Twitter files, showing the extensive coordination of the company with the government in a censorship system. Described by a federal court as Orwellian, former MSNBC host Keith Olbermann called for Musk to be deported and all federal contracts canceled with this company. Former Clinton Secretary of Labor Robert Reich wants Musk arrested for simply refusing to censor other people. Jonathan Turley, Elon Musk is viewed as a type of free thought contagion that must be eliminated. Turley says Musk might be that brilliantly unreasonable person. He says that with all of his idiosyncrasies and eccentricities, Musk just might be that brilliantly unreasonable person. The usual alliance of media, academia, government and corporate forces hit Musk, his companies and even advertisers on X. Other corporate officials collapsed like a house of cards to demands for censorship. Our next story is titled, China New Credit Data is a Disappointing Mess, sparking speculation of QE. 2 weeks ago, when the world was still enamored with Jim Cramer's idiotic idea that Chinese stonks can magically double in just a few weeks, we warned that the party was about to end. China's nominal economy is now twice as large. An equivalent stimulus would need the credit impulse to peak at 27 trillion yuan. At its most recent peak, though, China's credit impulse did not even reach 5 trillion yuan. This would require a major reversal of the downtrend in stimulus cycles through the past 2 decades. New RMB loans missed market expectations and were much lower than a year ago. The composition of new loans suggested credit demand remained weak in September. For all its talk, Beijing will need to unleash a new credit flood for markets to take it seriously. If the rally has legs, you need to see M1 growing faster than M2. Obel reflationary tsunami should explain why Bitcoin surged today, and why it is well on its way to new all-time highs. Our next story is titled, Lawfare is Jihad Against Our Country. Lawfaremedia.org is run by Benjamin Witz, a Brookings Senior Fellow. Lawfare is led by Field Marshal Mark Elias, architect of the ballot fraud that has caused Americans to lose faith in their elections. Mr. Elias engineered the 2020 changes in many states' election laws and bylaws to permit large-scale mail-in voting, organized ballot harvesting activities. He and his George Soros-financed staff lawyers sued states that attempted to require voter identification. The 65 Project seeks to disbar Trump-adjacent lawyers who attempt to challenge any voting irregularities in this year's election. The term "big lie" to foreclose any inquiry at all into election fraud. That half the people in this country accept such an Orwellian con tells you the vital role played by the perversion of language. We have entered a new era of anti-Semitism. Many might say it is due to the conduct of Israel warring against its enemies. I would say it's as much due to the adoption of jihad politics by the Marxist woke campaign. Our next story is titled, S&P 600. Russell 2000 split shows quality counts more than ever. S&P Small Cap 600 Index is back to trading near its 2021 record. Russell 2000 Index is about 10% below its peak despite a decent run this year. Our next story is titled, Bitcoin and Big Tech Rip on China QE Hope. Cash bonds closed. S&P and Nasdaq were the outperformers. Dow lagged, but all the majors were up solidly on the day. Mag 7 basket surging back near record highs as NVDA was lifted on more optimistic chatter from Huang. Overall activity levels are down -17% versus the trailing 2 weeks, in line with market volumes down -16% versus the 10 DMA. Our floor tilts -1% better for sale, with HFs better to buy and loss better to sale. Demand is concentrated in tech, healthcare and comms SVCs, with supply coming from energy, staples and cons disc. Bitcoin soared higher on the China QE hopes, topping $66,000, its highest since late Sept. Today, the dollar continued its charge higher to 2-month highs. The U.S. election, the uncertain pace of Federal Reserve interest rate cuts, and Middle East tensions are reasons for caution. The historical pattern during election years is for the VIX index to keep edging higher until late October before falling. Our next story is titled, Google agrees to buy nuclear power from small modular reactors to be built by Kairos Power. Google announced plans to buy power from Kairos Power's small modular reactors, SMRs. The move is part of a growing industry shift toward nuclear energy to meet rising data center demands. Google expects the first reactor online by 2030, adding 500 megawatts by 2035. Oklo has targeted its first SMRs to be online by 2027, 3 years ahead of Kairos' proposed timeline. The biggest winners will be not those who bet on the revolutionary technology that is AI, but those who backed something much more primitive, the electricity needed to power it. Back to Mail Online Home. Back to the page you came from. Back to the page where you came from. Back into the page that you came from. Back in the page this week. We told you about Google's plans to purchase power from a small modular reactor, SMR, that is backed by the Department of Energy. We are happy to make clear that this was not the case. We have been asked to clarify that this is in fact the case, and that Google is working with its utility partners to make the purchase. Our next story is titled, Goldman Issues Grim Outlook for AutoZone, citing significant exposure to struggling working poor consumers. Goldman downgrades AutoZone from buy to sell. The auto parts retailer's customer base is highly exposed to working poor consumers. High interest rates and inflation could crimp spending from this group. ASIO's NPS and NPI scores have been on the decline. The lower-income consumer will likely remain under pressure into 2025. As cars become more affordable, we see increased risk of a lower amount of repairs. AutoZone's valuation remains above historical absolute levels despite slower growth and the increased risk to the bottom line, analyst says. The biggest takeaway is that low-income consumer stress only worsens into the latter parts of the year. The study was published in the journal American Journal of Commerce. Why that showed rich and poor consumers were undergoing trade-down trends. The company has highlighted challenges in their commercial business as they manage through growing pains of a larger commercial business. The company's unit growth has remained under pressure, with the lower-income consumers deferring purchases in DIY and not buying discretionary products. That concludes our AI-generated news summary for today. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode.